Picture yourself sitting at your desk, surrounded by 5 different textbooks, dozens of browser tabs, and scattered notes. Your psychology concepts float disconnected from your biology terms, while your history dates seem to have nothing to do with your economics principles. That overwhelming feeling of information overload. We've all been there. But what if I told you your brain is already wired to connect all this information naturally? In the next few minutes, I'll show you how to activate your brain's built-in connection system, the same one that top students use unconsciously. Using 3 specific practices based on your brain's natural learning pathways, you'll discover how to transform that overwhelming flood of information into a clear, connected web of knowledge. You see, most students study like they're trying to fill separate buckets with information. Psychology goes here, biology there, economics in another bucket, points to different areas. But that's not how your brain naturally works. Your brain is constantly trying to make connections, looking for patterns, building networks of understanding. Let me show you what I mean with a simple example. When you learn about cell membranes in biology, your brain wants to connect that to the economic concept of selective barriers to entry in markets. When you study psychology's behavioral reinforcement, it naturally links to historical patterns of social change. These connections aren't just interesting, they're how your brain is designed to learn. Today, I'm going to show you 3 practices that work with your brain's natural connection systems. 1. First, we'll look at the power of visuo-spatial mapping, your brain's C system. 2. Then we'll explore temporal-auditory linking, your brain's SAY system. 3. Finally, we'll integrate kinesthetic anchoring, your brain's DO system. Each practice builds on the last, creating a complete system that transforms overwhelming information into clear, connected knowledge. And the best part? Once you understand this process, it works for any subject combination. Picture yourself trying to explain something you easily understand. Maybe it's your favorite game, or what turns to take to get to your best friend's house. Notice how naturally you can see those in your mind, move through it, feel the sequence of events. That's real understanding. Now contrast that with staring at your textbooks, where the information feels flat, disconnected, floating without anchor in your mind. We're going to show you how to learn what's in those textbooks and lectures, as well as you can find your way home. That gap between real understanding and memorized facts, that's what we're here to bridge today. Most students are drowning in information because they never learned how to transform abstract concepts into mental experiences they can sense, explore, and manipulate in their minds. You see, true understanding isn't about storing facts. It's about building an internal simulation of how things in the real world work. When you understand something, you can recreate it and manipulate that recreation in your mind. Think about expert chess players who can play entire games in their head, or musicians who can hear a full song before playing a note. They're not just remembering, they're simulating, feeling, and experiencing each movement. Your brain is already wired for this kind of deep understanding. It has 3 natural systems that work together to transform flat information into rich mental experiences you can actually work with. 1. Your visuo-spatial system. This is your mind's ability to create and manipulate mental shapes, spaces, and relationships. 1. It's not just about seeing. It's about having an internal sense of how things are positioned and how they move. 2. Your temporal-auditory system. This lets you simulate sequences, rhythms, and flows of information, hearing and feeling how concepts and events unfold over time. 3. Your kinesthetic system. This allows you to feel forces, pressures, and movements, giving you a bodily sense of how things work. Today, I'll show you how to consciously use these systems to transform any subject from abstract information into clear mental models you can actually work with. We'll start with the foundation, your visuo-spatial sense, and build up to a complete understanding system that works across all subjects. Let's start with your visuo-spatial system. When I say visuo-spatial, I don't just mean making pictures in your head. I mean developing a complete sense of how things exist in space. Let me show you what I mean. Take something simple, like understanding what makes a square different from other shapes. Sure, you could memorize a square has 4 equal sides and 4 right angles, but that's just words. Instead, try this. Imagine drawing a square in the air with your finger. Feel how you make that first line, then turn exactly 90 degrees. Draw again. Turn, draw, turn, and close it off. That's your visuo-spatial system at work. You're not just seeing the square, you're feeling its essential squareness. Let's try something more challenging. To really flex your visuo-spatial muscles, I want you to imagine a bicycle floating in empty space. Take a moment to see it clearly. The frame, the wheels, the handlebars. Now picture a soccer ball orbiting around it in a perfect sphere, like a moon around a planet. Watch how they rotate in opposite directions, the bike turning one way, the ball following its spherical path the other way. Got that? Now transform the ball's path into a pyramid shape. See it tracing the edges of an invisible pyramid around the still rotating bike. Feel how the ball changes speed as it moves through the corners versus the straight edges. Now let's apply this to something more complex. Say you're studying cell biology and trying to understand how proteins are made. Instead of memorizing, transcription happens in the nucleus, then mRNA travels to ribosomes for translation. Create a mental movie. Picture the DNA double helix unzipping. Feel the RNA polymerase sliding along one strand, building the messenger RNA like a train laying down tracks. See that mRNA snake through nuclear pores out into the cytoplasm until it reaches a ribosome. This isn't just visualization, it's building a working model in your mind. Your temporal-auditory system isn't just about hearing, it's about recognizing patterns and sequences, just like how you naturally chunk sounds into words when someone speaks, or how you instantly recognize the repeated patterns in a song's structure. This system helps you understand how information flows and connects over time. Let's use this for learning. Say you're studying the causes of World War I. Instead of trying to memorize a disconnected list of events, analyze their sequence and importance. Which events were critical turning points, like the assassination in Sarajevo, and which were contributing factors that built tension over time? Look at how nationalism and militarism created a foundation for conflict, how the alliance system connected seemingly isolated events into a chain reaction. Identify the key decision points, moments where different choices could have led to different outcomes. This system is particularly powerful for breaking down complex processes into meaningful chunks. When studying chemical reactions, identify the key transition points, moments where the reaction could proceed in different directions based on conditions. Recognize which steps must happen in a specific order and which ones happen simultaneously. This chunking technique reveals deeper patterns in any process. Take evolution. Break it down into distinct mechanisms: variation, inheritance, selection. Notice how these basic chunks combine in different ways. Some changes accumulate gradually, while others create sudden shifts. Identify critical thresholds where small changes trigger larger effects. Look for similar patterns across different species and environments. This approach works for any complex system. In economics, break down market cycles into their component parts. Notice how some factors trigger immediate changes, while others have delayed effects. Identify the critical thresholds where quantitative changes become qualitative ones, like when price changes suddenly shift consumer behavior. By understanding these patterns of sequence and dependency, you develop an intuitive sense of how systems change over time. If you want to move from getting random bits of inspiration to using a full framework for personal excellence, please take a few minutes to check out the curated and organized content on my YouTube channel @The Transformation Cortex. If you think they would find it useful, you can also share this with your friends. I appreciate your time and attention. Let's get back into the thick of things. Your kinesthetic system is your body's way of understanding forces, pressures, and movements. It's how you know exactly how hard to throw a ball or how much pressure to apply when writing. This system becomes powerful when you create scenarios that let you physically intuit concepts. In physics, don't just memorize orbital mechanics. Imagine yourself as a giant standing among the planets. Exactly how hard would you need to tap Mercury to nudge it into a new orbit? What direction would you push to make it spiral into the sun? If you grabbed Venus and spun it faster like a basketball on your finger, how would its orbit change as it went around the sun? By creating these scenarios, you start to understand gravitational forces not as equations, but as real interactions you can explore. When studying military history, imagine yourself walking the front lines of a battle. Feel the pressure points where armies clash. Where would you push to break through? Where would you need to reinforce to prevent collapse? Create scenarios where you shift troops between sectors, feeling how thinning one area increases vulnerability, while strengthening another creates opportunity. In social sciences, scale your scenarios to feel mass movements. Imagine standing in the middle of the French Revolution. Feel the surge of crowds flowing through Paris streets, the mounting pressure as social tensions reach breaking point. Create different scenarios. What happens if the crowd meets resistance? How does momentum build or dissipate? These physical intuitions help you understand how social movements grow and spread. Even in mathematics, create scenarios to understand relationships. Don't just solve inequalities. Imagine yourself as the inequality sign, physically keeping two expressions in balance. When you multiply both sides by a negative number, feel yourself flip around to maintain the relationship. When factoring polynomials, imagine yourself as a sorter, physically grouping like terms together, feeling which combinations maintain the balance. These three systems, visuo-spatial, temporal-auditory, and kinesthetic, aren't separate tools. They work together to create a complete understanding of whatever you're learning. The key is to consciously engage all three systems when you study. But here's what most people miss. You have to get creative and even playful with how you use these systems. Think about it. Every expert has their own quirky way of understanding their field. Ever wonder how your physics professor intuitively knows which way a particle will spin? Or how that A student in your biology class never seems to forget cell processes? They've probably built their own weird and wonderful mental models that make perfect sense to them. Don't be afraid to get strange with it. Maybe you understand chemical reactions better by imagining atoms as different personalities at a party. Perhaps economic systems make more sense if you picture them as a giant pinball machine. These playful analogies aren't just fun. They create a foundation of comfort and familiarity with the material. And that's crucial, because when you're comfortable playing with ideas, you can handle them confidently under pressure. Start with your strongest system, the one that feels most natural to you, but don't stop there. Layer in the others. Mix and match approaches until you find combinations that click for you. And stay curious about how others might be visualizing these concepts. Sometimes just asking, "How do you picture this in your head?" can reveal entirely new ways of understanding. Remember, your brain already knows how to do this. You use these systems every day to understand the physical world around you. Now you're just consciously applying them to academic subjects and having some fun while you're at it. The next time you sit down to study, don't just read the words or memorize facts. Get creative. Play with the concepts. Ask yourself, what's the weirdest way I could picture this? How could I turn this into a mental game? What kind of bizarre scenario would help me understand this better? Transform that flat information into a rich mental playground you can explore. Because that's what real understanding is. Not just knowing about something, but having a working model in your mind that you can play with, test, and trust. And with these three systems working together, combined with your own creative twists, you can build that kind of deep understanding in any subject.